very good experience to find yourself being told that you're not quite there yet on 680, so you keep on going, and you end up in San Jose. And then you turn around and try to rush back. But somehow the Lord got us here. Everything that could have been thrown against us on the road was car trouble and everything else, so we're very grateful to be here. I kept saying over and over as I prayed going down the road that this had to be something tonight, some type of fantastic meeting, because usually when we're this well fought getting to a place, something's going to take place. So I came in expecting something. I'm sure you were expecting to leave as late as it is. But if you must go, as they said, go ahead. Otherwise, bear with me. I'll try not to keep you too long. The only complaint that my pastor has against me is that I'm long-winded. And the only complaint that another pastor had last Sunday night was that I wasn't long-winded enough. He wanted to go to 11. I promise not to keep you that late. But anyway, I don't fool around, so I'll just start right out. I can only make you one promise that what I've got to say is the truth. It won't seem that way to some of you. It'll just seem that I'm either crazy or I'm the biggest liar and storyteller in the world. That's what our televisions have done to us. They've gotten us to a frame of mind that we do not realize the real world around us. When I talk in many youth rallies, many of the Christian schools, I start right out by tearing their television and rock idols down by personal experiences that I've had with them in the occult world. And then from there we try to build them up with real heroes, the number one being Jesus Christ. But I come from a family where I grew up having my own heroes. My number one hero was my great, somewhere way back there, grandfather named Francis Collins. Francis Collins owned the first ship that the Puritans landed in here. It just so happened that 50% of the people on board were also witchcraft people fleeing from Scotland. And they were called the Collinses. They were all his family, and that's how all witchcraft came to the United States. So when I grew up, I was being trained how great my family was, that it was the second most important family in the Illuminati and the occult world, and that someday I'd be very important and so on. So I had my own heroes. And television didn't help much. The reason I'm so down on television is I grew up around the television world, on the insides of it. When I was just a teenager, Hollywood paid for my way out to California so that I could bring a couple of diaries that belonged to my family that I had inherited by will as the last male heir of the Collins family. If you wondered why that fits with Todd's, the Collins family changed their name about 100 years ago to Todd to cover up some of the things that they had done. But I'm sure some of you will remember the show Dark Shadows. That was the show that paid for me to come to Hollywood to bring the diaries. Many of the scripts were taken from actual incidences in the diaries. And for instance, Barnabas Collins was based upon a man named Francis Williams Collins, a Revolutionary War hero. When I was growing up in the occult world, we were always taught that we had been somebody else before. It wasn't good enough that we were the person we were now. We always had to be a dozen people that we were before. We had to deal with this life and all the ones we were supposed to have had before and all the ones we were going to have in the future. And I was supposed to be in Francis Williams Collins. So I said that's who they based Barnabas on, so I wasn't exactly the nicest guy in the world. I grew up this way. When I was 13, I was taken into what is called the outer court to be trained as a priest in witchcraft. That had been like your pastor who just stepped off, or better yet, more like the youth director or something. When I was 18, I was initiated a high priest. That would have made me the pastor. At the same time, I became draft exempt. I did not have to go into service, but a bunch of us smart-aleck young, I have to correct the pastor, not warlocks, but wizards and witches, went into the Army because we felt the Army really needed witchcraft. It just couldn't get along without us. And since the Army didn't think that they needed any chaplains that were witches, we just kind of went in on our own. So I went on in, along with a lot of others, and I never did anything, I guess, halfway. I got in Vietnam, found out I liked Vietnam so well, I was willing to re-enlist. In fact, I'd already signed the papers to stay for another tour in Vietnam when I became wounded in the last month of the first tour, and I was shipped back to the United States. My time was almost up, so I was discharged, and the same day I re-enlisted. I asked for Vietnam, and they said because of my wounds that hadn't totally healed yet, I couldn't go to Vietnam yet, so I got Germany. Now, I had re-enlisted for 6 years. And until the time of my re-enlistment, I always thought that witchcraft was just witchcraft. There was nothing more to witchcraft than just casting spells, and that we were smarter than the Christians and other religions because we really knew who the gods were, and we were born with special powers because our ancestors had passed them down to us, and all the little stories they like to tell us. Witchcraft was a little different at that time. When I first got into it as a young person, you had to be from a family that had generations after generations of witchcraft. In order to be a Coven member at the time, you had to have 3 generations at least. While the minimum that I had that we could find was 7. So there wasn't any problem, and we knew it went past that where there weren't records kept anymore. But that was all witchcraft was. As I tell many people, when many of you were raised as Christians, and I guess that's why I can't understand why some of the Christian teenagers are the way they are today. If they were raised in this glorious gospel, why they're so rebellious. I would have given anything to have been raised this way. But when you were learning the 23rd Psalm, I was learning the witches' chant. When you were reading about Moses opening the Red Sea, I was reading J.R.R. Tolkien. When you guys were learning different memory verses and so on, and the 4 spiritual laws and the 10 commandments, I was having to read C.S. Lewis. Of course, I've been greatly surprised that Christians read that too. But this is the way I grew up, and this is all I believed in, was just that there were mighty gods and we were special people. We were their priests and priestesses. Until I re-enlisted. I went to Germany, spent a month home, went to Germany, spent another month. 2 months out of a 6-year enlistment. One night while taking drugs and drinking, I shot and killed an officer in downtown Stuttgart. Now if there's one thing that the Army does not like, it does not like its sergeants killing its officers. They have a quick cure for that. They threw me in solitary confinement. And as the court-martial proceeded on, and things began to look like I was going to spend the rest of my life in Leavenworth if I was lucky, all of a sudden a riot took place in the stockade, and although I was in solitary confinement, other people were placed in the cell with me. One of the men that was placed in the cell with me had been scheduled to get out that particular day and was held because of the riot. So I kind of talked him in by bribing him a little that if he made a long-distance phone call for me and told certain relatives of mine that I was in trouble, he'd receive some money for it and I'd be a lot happier. So he called collect to Los Angeles and talked to my foster mother, explained what the situation was. And I was sitting back waiting for her to get all these big witches together to cast spells on the judges and make all the officers that were trying me think I was a real nice guy and that it was self-defense and everything was going to be fine. They'd just let me off. Now that's all that I had ever been taught that witches could do. But 3 days later, my cell door opened there in solitary. I stepped out in the light for the first time in 32 days. I heard some very strange words. You are honorably discharged from the United States Army. And the man that was saying them was a senator by the name of William Saxby. He had a congressman with him named Wiley and about 3 or 4 generals, and they were handing me an honorable discharge. And on the discharge papers, it didn't say I was bad, didn't say that I had been in jail, didn't say anything. It gave me all my time and rank, security clearances that I had in my possession, and didn't explain why I still had over 5 years to go in the United States Army. It just discharged me honorably. So I took it and didn't want to argue with him and left and went back to the States and arrived at my home in Columbus, Ohio. I asked my real mother, I have 2 mothers, foster mother and a real mother. I said, what type of spell is so good that it makes senators and generals do what you want? And it's a really good spell. I'd like to learn it. She just looked at me and said, you just don't understand, do you? She said, we didn't cast a spell on them. They're with us. I said, oh, far out. Senators that are witches. She says, no, they just belong to us. And I didn't understand what she was saying. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do now? I'd like to take my old coven back over and so on. So she handed me an envelope that had been waiting there. She'd explained that there was one there and one in Los Angeles. They didn't quite know where I was going to show up. I opened the envelope. Very intriguing thing. $2,000 in $100 bills. A lot of money. Also was a one-way plane ticket to New York City. I said, well, what's this for? She said, well, you make a reservation, you get on the next plane, you get out of here and you get to New York City and they'll meet you at the airport. I said, well, who are they? And where did this money come from? She says, you get there and they'll tell you and you'll know who's supposed to meet you when you get there. Now, witches are very curious people. That's why when we do some of the most demonic rites imaginable, and our hair would stand on end and almost turn snow white overnight from all the spooky things, we couldn't wait to get back in there. We were always curious what was going to happen the next. I think that's why some of the people get on roller coasters and like to be scared to death. It's just the way with the witches. They really spooky things going on, and they can't wait to get back, and this was extremely intriguing. So I got on the plane, and I flew to New York, and I got off the plane. Sure enough, no problem with recognizing who met me. I'd read his books for years. In fact, he's the man who first created Christian witchcraft. His name was Dr. Raymond Buckland, head of the anthropology department, Columbia University. At that time, he isn't now. Graduate of Oxford University, Rhodes Scholar, handpicked by the Rothschilds to lead the Illuminati for him. So I arrived, and he took me to his house, and the next few months he carefully rearranged all my ideas for me. He told me that all the things that I had learned about witchcraft were just stories that we told the lower people. And where I thought there was only 3 levels and I was as high and as powerful as a witch could go, he assured me there were 3 more. I guess I should have backed off then, figured if I was lied to the first time, maybe I'd be lied to the second time. But as I said, witches have an incurable curiosity. They've got to find out everything. So I let him train me, and he explained to me that since I was a male Collins, I was in the Collins family, that I had a position to take. And that there was a board of directors called the Grand Druid Council, which contained 13 of the most powerful witches in the world. And that my place was on that council. And I said, oh, great. When do I take it? And he said, well, somebody just died. I kind of always wondered if he died or they shot him or something. You never can tell in the Illuminati. But he sent me to Los Angeles. I studied for 6 more months with my foster mother, holding kind of a temporary rank on this council, and then taking up to Colorado Springs and initiated. And I do believe that when I testified here at the last time, I explained who the person was that handed me the ceremonial knife for that ceremony. Another senator named George McGovern. You might, before the night gets over, start to realize that Washington isn't bad as you thought it was. It's worse. But the ceremony, by the way, was human sacrifice. And the leader of that ceremony that night was George McGovern. That's why when we did the broken cross, we drew his picture into the broken cross as a person practicing human sacrifice. But after the ceremony, I went down to San Antonio and decided that would be the perfect place. And I moved into San Antonio to watch all the drug traffic in the area, and I was given a 13-state area. That totaled out to about 65,000 initiated witches and wizards, priests and priestesses. Now that's just the staff of the church. That's not the congregation. So if there's that many ministers in that area, you can imagine what the population is. In California, whereas most of the Grand Druids have many states like I did, I had 13, California has a Grand Druid all to itself because there's that many witches in California. In fact, it's the most populated area in the world for witchcraft. And the Bay Area just happens to have the most. But anyway, this is where I lived. I only left it 8 times a year to attend what we called council meetings. Now, to give you an idea, Monday was one of those council meetings. They hold them 8 times a year. May 1st, they held a council meeting, and from our information, they held it in San Francisco. So you were kind of close to it this time. Things went along fine. I enjoyed the money, par. I always thought they were kind of weird because they kept talking about controlling the world. And I thought, let's stay back with witchcraft, this world government thing, they're a little weird. Witches are never going to control the world. And finally, on August the 1st, 1972, things changed. Courier from the London Embassy, a member of our United States State Department, arrived with a courier document pouch sealed with the crest of the State Department, brought it through customs, unopened, nobody could touch it, brought it in to San Antonio, and I was hosting the meeting this time. And it was on Latimus, August the 1st. The man came in, laid the pouch down in the temple room up in the casino building, walked out, and left it. He wasn't to know what was in it. The door was locked, security guards were placed on the outside, and Dr. Buckland took up what's called the Atam-Aes, the witch's ceremonial knife. He slid open the seal, unlocked everything, and took out 6 letters. We'd seen letters like this before, no big deal. They had the crest of the Illuminati, which is on the back of your $1 bill, so you can look at it later. On them, sealed in wax, red wax. The only problem was that the first 4 were standard business. They only contain checks, bribe checks and so on. Usually bribe checks start at about $500,000 to give you kind of an idea and work up into the millions. But then they've got almost all the money in the world. Why should they worry? You spend a $5 bill and you panic. For what a $5 bill feels like to you, $1 million feels like to them. So believe me, they've got the financial strength to do it. The fifth one was totally different. It's very thick, about 30 pages, and it was handwritten. Now, according to the laws of witchcraft, if anything is religious, it must be written in a special ink with a dip pen, and the person who's writing it own handwriting. Nobody, you don't dictate it. It doesn't get typed up. Nobody writes it for you. Now, in the Illuminati, the Rothschilds are not humans. They're not just the richest family in the world. They are gods in human bodies. More or less the counterfeit of what Jesus Christ was when he was on the earth. They're the sons and daughters of Lucifer in human body, and his wife and so on. So that this council that I was on is the private priesthood of those gods. And when those gods talk, the priests listen and the priestesses listen. Then they tell political people. That's why a handful of witches have so much power over so many political people. Because they're simply just like a tape recorder for some very powerful people that everybody else considers to be holy and to be gods. So we opened this one in Philip Rothschild's handwriting, and it would have been the same to, well, it was like, the gods sent their own private message. So we opened it up. Dr. Buckland started reading it. It's a chart. A friend of mine, Dr. Tom Berry, has placed that chart in a 30-page book, and we're proofing it now, and Dr. Stuart Crane is going to publish it, and we hope to have it in Christians' hands in about 3 months. It's a step-by-step plan beginning in 1973, at the first of the year, to the end of 1980, to take over the world by taking over the United States. Now, before you think that that's impossible, I've watched the news over the past 5.5 years, and they're not only on schedule, they're a year ahead of schedule. And when I told people this 5 years ago, they thought I was crazy, like a lot of people think now. When I told them that we were supposedly not going to have any fuel, although we were going to have it, and that the gasoline prices were going to go sky high, I even told them a crazy story that the farmers were going to go on strike and the coal mines were going to close down. Now, I wonder where I could have gotten a crazy idea like that. And I was saying it 5 years ago. Only when I went on the East Coast this time, nobody was laughing because they were getting cut back on electricity, and people were only working 20 hours a week because there wasn't any coal. So after reading this, I thought, these people are really crazy, crazier and crazier. But I stopped laughing when I read the sixth letter. It was in Philip Rothschild's handwriting too. Now, before I tell you what's in it, I want to say something. The Mormon doctrine and the witchcraft doctrine are almost identical in how the world began. According to the witches, Lucifer chose his son and his daughter, which were married, to come to the world and lead the rest of his little kids down here. Believe it or not, they're supposed to have landed in a flying saucer. And they landed here, and man was just more or less assuming their shape from apes, and they intermarried with man, and that's how, well, the original people were the witches that arrived, and their children became the witches, and the ones that they didn't marry with are the mortals. If you remember Bewitched, you remember the doctrine of witches and mortals. Now, that may seem a little crazy to you, but they firmly believe it. And that Adam, who had the ability to turn back into other lives again, like everybody else did not. Because when the evilness of man settled into the garden, and that's why the garden was bad, there's no original sin according to witches. And Lucifer had planned to come and live on this world along with his children, but he couldn't because of all the evilness of man. And when they say that, I almost feel like they want to write Christians sometimes, the way the doctrine goes. But Adam would come back to bring peace to the world and to unpollute it so his father could come back. Now that's their doctrine. And when the sixth letter said, we have found Adam to be in the world, and he is ready to make peace so that his father can return. I knew enough about revelations in the Christian Bible to say, hey, I'm in the wrong camp. And I asked a very stupid question at that moment. I said, isn't this in the Christian Bible? Now, witches teach that the Christian Bible is an absolute lie, created by the god of evil named Jesus. Okay? So when I asked that, I almost got lynched. Sometimes more or less like the Christians like to do when I'm 2 hours late. I got to get you to laugh somehow. So I said, well, you know, I'm just kidding. Don't worry about it. I was just joking, trying to lighten things up. They calmed down. I left, did some more drugs. Now, I was doing about $150 a day worth of Crystal Speed at the time. I weighed about 149 pounds, and after looking at some of my rock friends like David Crosby that's doing $200 a day worth of drugs now, I firmly believe that if the Lord hadn't saved me, I probably wouldn't have made it another year. At that time, from August the 1st on, for the next 30 days, I thought of nothing but how to get out. But even though I realized that the Christian Bible was telling the truth, it just never dawned on me because of the spirits inside me that if it was telling the truth in that, then salvation and Calvary were real also. So I went on trying to think of a dozen places I could go hide in this world and marking everyone off that they'd find me any place I'd go, and deciding that since, you know, if I died, I'd just come back in another life, and that wouldn't be too good if they were running the world, so what was I going to do? Finally, God, Lord Jesus Christ, I want to say that because I come from a world that Lucifer has been God too. Finally, the Lord Jesus Christ started moving for this, the best way I know how to put it. I don't believe in accidents. I don't believe that my salvation or anybody else's salvation was an accident. I believe in God infinite. I believe that God sets in motion the things to bring you about. You still have the choice. But many of you who don't know Him tonight, the Lord brought you here whether you know it or not. Much of you were probably brought here by praying friends and relatives. A man found his daughter, a pastor by the name of Smith, found his daughter, an initiated witch, shortly thereafter, he told me later, he said, I couldn't believe it. Here I was, I went to Baylor University, I was a minister in the Southern Baptist Church, and Baylor did everything but hit me over the head that there was no devil and no witches and no demons in this day and age, much like many fundamental Bible colleges I know today. He said, so I had to relearn all over again. Instead of taking man's idea, I took the Word of God. I found that Deuteronomy 18, 19, and 20 gave a list of witchcraft in the occult world, and that Acts 16, 16, 17, 18, and 19 gave the power over witchcraft, what its power was, and how to handle its power and the power over it, which is the taking authority over the devil and the demons that are in witches. That's how they get their power. The stronger the witch, the more demons that they have allowed in. When they take a young person and they train them for witchcraft, they give them what's lovingly, I guess, called homework. They give them assignments that they're to do, and the assignments tear down every moral fiber and training that the person has, and just literally they become a human chalice. They fill up with demons. As they do these things, they break down all the barriers holding the devil back, and when they're done, they have a very programmed, very brainwashed, and very powerful supernatural witch or wizard. So he prayed and he fasted. I heard Jack Howells the other day. I guess I never realized until I heard him how little Christians pray and fast. He's been around a long time and says he's only met a handful of praying and fasting Christians, and I can believe it anymore. But this minister prayed and he fasted. He said, God, let me cross Lance Collins' path. And that was my occult name. He prayed and he prayed, and finally he felt this is the time, and he got up one morning, Saturday morning, a few days before Labor Day in 1972, and he went downtown and he started going through the occult stores. Now, was never in the occult stores there much. And the one building that I lived in, there were 2 occult stores in that building, downtown San Antonio. One day, one of the managers that Saturday morning had an overdose of drugs, was critical and couldn't make it in, and I had to go unlock the place for the sales girl to come in. And I just unlocked, got all the cash fixed up and everything, was getting ready to leave, hadn't been there more than about 5 minutes, and his pastor came in. Now, I knew he was a Baptist the moment he walked through the door. He carried a big black Bible. You have to be in southern Texas to understand. They don't go any place without a big black Thompson or something like that. He carries Schofields up here, they carry Thompsons down there. As one pastor says, I like a rapid-fire Bible. But he came in, and I remember telling Linda, the girl that was with me, oh boy, here comes trouble. He walked up and he said, I'm looking for Lance Collins, and kind of braced myself, and I said, I'm Lance Collins, can I help you? And he said, well, I want to tell you about the love of Jesus. I said, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. You take your Christian garbage and you go somewhere else. I remember the words very distinct. So he started preaching anyway. They figured he was there. He just dug his heels in and opened up. Well, I gave him about 2 sentences, and the spirits in me took over, and they started cussing. He just kept on preaching. So I started reciting chants, demonic chants, out to block what he was doing. Usually it got Christians scared, and they ran off. He didn't budge. He stopped, and he said, well, I see, Ephesians 6:12. I'm not warring against Lance Collins. I'm warring against the demons inside him. So, since they want to talk to me, I order them to be silent in the name of Jesus. And he just started in a very powerful prayer, pleading the blood of Jesus Christ, and finally ending with this. He says, I order, in the name of Jesus, the devil to stop giving you any power of witchcraft, and to stop giving you any of his benefits, and took one look at me and saw that I was on drugs and said, and stop giving you drugs. Now, parents, listen to me. If your kids are on drugs and you've got a problem, stop preaching to them. Just order the demon inside them and the devil to stop supplying them the drugs. You'd be surprised, we've done it, how fast the pushers and dealers they're getting their drugs from get busted all of a sudden. Try it. It works. And when he was done, he says, now I'm going to pray and fast for you, Lance, until you get saved. And I don't know why I said it. I just said, you're crazy. Get out of here. Don't do that. Don't do that. I remember I've told dozens of witches, I'm going to pray and fast till you get saved. Don't do that. One thing a demon does not like is prayer and fasting. He turned around. He walked off. One thing that had intrigued me, I kept trying to convince myself that I had shut up to listen to him because he was so weird. But what it was simply he had taken authority over the demons, and I had shut up, and I had heard the whole thing. I went on upstairs, very shaken and not knowing why, very sick and not knowing why. I'd never felt like this in my life. I'd never come up against a Christian like this. Usually I said, I'm a witch, and they couldn't wait to find the nearest bomb shelter or crawl under the bed or get the straitjacket out. Well, something about my eyes back then, they never questioned when I said I was a witch. They just took off running. So I went upstairs, took out my drugs, my needle, did a fix. No problem. I had sent all the rest of my drugs out that night, big shipments that we had stored around the area, to other states because we had a huge shipment coming in that night. I said, boy, this will teach that dumb preacher. I ought to go over and drop off a kilo of it on his door just to teach him that the devil doesn't exist and I don't get my drugs from the devil and he can't stop me from getting drugs. Besides, there's nothing wrong with drugs. I'm just literally dying, eating away from them. There's nothing wrong with drugs. This is how the young people are today. Their friends are overdosing. I've talked with people, 14 and 15. I said, how many friends do you lose every year? Oh, 10, 20. They overdose on angel dust or something, killer weed, different things. But there's nothing wrong with drugs. I had asked one girl why she was so bummed out. She says, well, this is the 5th girlfriend that's ended up in the mental hospital not knowing who she is from taking acid and having a bad trip. And I said, do you take it? She says, sure, but I don't have any bad trips. There's nothing wrong with acid. When I got saved, I didn't have a friend that either wasn't in jail or wasn't dead. It'll do you something to you to walk into your friend's apartment and see them laying on the floor, needles still in their veins, and dead from an overdose, or from strychnine being added to the drug because they wanted them out of the way. I went on upstairs, as I said, I did the drug. Not to worry, more drugs coming in. Except midnight, my phone rang, and I was still speeding. I hardly ever slept, hardly ever ate. Answered the phone, and I said, yeah, what's going on? Private number, I knew it had to be somebody that knew it. And they told me a story that I didn't like too well. We had paid off the Border Patrol. Everything was taken care of, standard run of drugs. Except that night, the ATF had heard that some illegal aliens were coming across the border. They called all the Border Patrol over, from the regular stations, and had put on reserve units. And a guy that was so spaced out, he had sampled a little of pure speed. There was 3 huge cartons about this big, close to $1 million worth of speed, in the back of the car, just sitting on the back seat with the lid off where everybody could see it. He wasn't worried. Drove up to the thing, and the guy wheels out a gun and says, you're under arrest. It's all over in a matter of moments. Sure, he never even realized what happened. It was all because a preacher took authority over the devil. When I got that call, come flooding back, this guy's weird. Here he is stopping my drugs. And I said, no, that's just an accident. But it never had happened before. So I realized after, calming down about the situation that I was going to be going through withdrawal pretty soon. So I made some local calls. Nobody had anything. Most people around there were on heroin and not speed. So I made some out-of-state calls and finally found in the state of Ohio some of the drugs that we had sent on had arrived, and they would get them down there, but it'd be like Tuesday morning because of legal police actions they were having up there. But that's too long for somebody on drugs as bad as I was. Sure enough, by Monday night, I almost didn't know who I was anymore. Bound and determined that I was going to get drugs no matter what had to be. I got a handgun, went in my car, started the drive out. I was going to go to every area around that I knew if I had to kill the person, I was going to get drugs. And wrecked the car trying to get out of the parking lot. Just got out of the car, left the gun and everything just sitting there. Started walking down the street kind of in a daze, trying to get myself together, and came upon a movie theater. Big bright lights attracted me. Just paid my money. Wasn't paying attention to the movie. Nothing. Went on in. Got about 3 rows back right from the screen. Here was some idiot up there waving a Bible all over the place and flash bulbs going off, and it was a movie called The Cross and the Switchblade. As I got mad about this, what am I into now and stuff, I started getting intrigued with a character named Nicky Cruz. And I guess I probably got everybody in that theater mad at me because I kept yelling at Dave Wilkerson, stay away from him, preacher, dumb Christian, leave him alone, he's just fine the way he is. All the way through the movie, cussing this guy out and telling him to leave Nicky Cruz alone. Finally, something very weird happened. Now, we knew that Christians talked about being born again. But then, born again was a phrase used by the Masons and a phrase used by the witches. Didn't mean anything. But we had been taught by the doctrine of astrology, which, by the way, it takes 3 things to practice witchcraft. Astrology, herbs, and jewelry, or talismans. So witchcraft, and astrology, I learned from a very early child. One thing I'd been taught was I was born a set personality. The stars had decided what my personality was going to be like. And there was no way, no rite in witchcraft, no nothing that would ever change my personality. If I was bad, I was bad. Besides, I didn't consider myself too bad. I mean, I could have always been a Christian. That would have been terrible. So I sat there and I watched him, and he changed. He wasn't just as saying, I'm born again. He changed. Now listen to me tonight. If you've walked the aisle and you've given your heart to God, and there wasn't a complete turnaround, a complete change, and you went back to the way that you were 5 minutes before you walked that aisle, something is wrong. I'm not a Billy Graham that will have you say 3 words and say you're saved. It's in the fruit, and if there has not been a change in your life, something's wrong. And I got up and I walked out of that theater in utter confusion. Here was another thing that was in the Word of God that was happening. I walked on out. A man walked up. About a dozen of us, I guess, were walking out of the theater at the one time. He walked up and he passed 1 tract out. He gave it to me. He turned around, didn't say much. He just said, this is for you, turned around and walked off. The tract was called Bewitched. So I sat there and I read. I said, this guy's pretty smart. He says that Bewitched was put on by the witches. Well, I knew that. My foster mother was one of the producers. I practically grew up on the sets. I sat there and I watched the rest of the track, Ouija board being run by demons. Well, we knew that. That's why witches didn't use Ouija boards. We let the Christians use it. So I read on, but the one thing I could not get over was this hell thing with the flames and the devil, because witches don't believe in the devil. Satanists do, not witches. So I said, this guy's so right, but he's probably just a dumb Christian. Threw it in the water, walked on. Started going to go back to my apartment, got in the casino building, heard the music coming from one of our nightclubs there called the Club Aquarius, decided to go on over. Nobody there that I knew except the staff, so I went on back and locked the door to the manager's office and I sat down. I said, I got to think this thing out. I'd like to talk to a Christian. I was talking to a man on the phone today, Jack Chick, and he was going over all the people that he had found in his investigations that were on the Illuminatus payroll that were ministers, supposed to be fundamental ministers. And I said, yeah, I know, Jack. As I sat in that manager's office that night, he knew my testimony. I said, my biggest problem was I spent 2 hours trying to think of a pastor in the town that we did not have on our payoff. Well, there were pastors. That's why I didn't know them, because they weren't on our payoff. And finally, I remembered that just the night before, one of our witches, which was a prostitute in the area, in downtown San Antonio, had come in screaming in the Club Aquarius, and I wasn't in the mood to hear any screaming, particularly from her at the moment, going through withdrawal. But she was complaining that she was going bankrupt. And what the problem was her area was over by the Greyhound bus station, and she'd be over there prostituting, and some idiots from a Christian coffee house would come over and preach to the guys, and she would proposition them. That can really put you out of business. I mean, no serviceman's going to walk off with a prostitute with somebody telling them about hell at the same moment. So she decided we had to do something about the place, and I told her to get lost, but I remembered it. And I said, well, that's only 8 blocks away. It's only 2 in the morning. Nobody'd be in bed at 2 in the morning. Which is the night people, you know. Took off walking on over there. The place had a reputation of its own. Just 3 months earlier, it had been a burlesque place, show bar with strippers in it. Baptist preacher said, enough is enough. We don't need this down here. He goes in, jumps up on the bar stool, up on the bar, shoves 2 strippers in the middle of their act off the bar, and starts preaching. 15 minutes later, the 2 strippers had pulled the curtains down off the wall, wrapped them around them, kneeling down at the bar, giving their heart to the Lord. They're still Christians this day, by the way. I know them. The man and woman that owns the place is praying, giving their heart to the Lord. 3 members of the 4-piece band are, 2 of the 3 bartenders, and about 15 of the customers. That's a quick revival. I like to have that quick. So I went on over there. Now, they had turned the deed to this place when they got saved. This is what I mean about a change in your life. They could have rented the building out. They took the deed, and they gave it to one of the Baptist churches in the area and said, do what you want with it. Just turned it into a Christian coffee house. What better way? So I went over, opened the door, and it was supposed to close at midnight according to the sign, but the door was unlocked. So I went on in, and one guy was there, bent over the Coke fountain. You know, they changed the booze over for Coke. That's what some Christians haven't done. And he was sitting there working on the Coke fountain, and I went in and we started talking. And he started witnessing to me. Now, I have nothing against the 4 spiritual laws or any set plan like the Roman trail or anything like this. They're fine. They've won thousands of souls. But that particular plan didn't mean anything to me. I wasn't even interested in it because, for mainly, I didn't believe totally the Word of God. And I wanted something that would deal with my immediate problems. And I wasn't hearing anything. Finally, he realized that he needed some help, so he called up his pastor. Now, as everybody knows, nobody calls their pastor at 3 in the morning, do they? No, just all the time. So he called him up, and the pastor says, well, we've been praying and fasting for this guy along with some other churches. We'll get right on him. I imagine he probably called up a bunch of people. And he come back and said, now, Lord, this is out of my hands. The man's name was Claude Elmer. He said, this is out of my hands. I don't know the first thing about witchcraft. I don't know the first thing about the devil's kingdom, but you do. And they quoted Luke chapter 10, where the Lord had saw the devil fall from heaven, and we had power over the devil. And he said, now you were there when it happened. You educate me right now. What scriptures do I give this man? And he said, I'd like to read you something. He opened his Bible to 2 Timothy 1:7. It is the best scripture in the world to witness to anybody in the occult. Because when you're in the occult, there's one thing that you do not have. You do not have a mind without fear. 24 hours a day. You live in a nightmare world, and you try to convince yourself by brainwashing yourself that you're not unhappy. And he sat there and he said, God can remake your mind and take away the fear. When he said, take away the fear, I said, let's get with this thing right now. And he started praying with me, and he led me in a prayer of salvation. And I remember when I closed, I said, Lord, I want your forgiveness. I want to miss hell. I believe in it now. But I want you to take this fear out of my life. And I was sitting there shaking, scared to death somebody's going to walk through the door anytime and see me in this place and report me. I said, Lord, take the fear away. And when I got up out of there, I didn't have any fear. In fact, I walked back, went right on in my apartment, sat down, took a Bible with me. And when I went down the next day, I was reading the Bible, walking into the occult store. The fear was so far gone, I almost got myself killed. When God does it, he does it right. Now, we've been trying to minister to people in the occult for a long time. We've really been spinning our wheels for 5.5 years. We've gotten about 500 people saved. About 50 of them have been killed. When I was here last, we've been in prayer for 2 weeks about a new idea that we felt would work. And that was a retreat for the occult to go to. This Monday, on their New Year's Day, couldn't have been arranged better. We didn't do it on purpose, but it was perfect. While their grand druids were meeting, our rehab center opened. First candidate is already in it. Right now, coming from Maryland, is a girl that's the second most powerful person that had ever left the Illuminati. Philip Rothschild's own girlfriend, teenage girlfriend, left of the occult from the 11th richest family. Found out about the house going to be opened before our plan to release the news through Chick Publication tracts and the phone numbers to go with it ever came out. They're not even off the press yet, and the occult world already knows and is calling hotline numbers that aren't even published yet. They somehow found the numbers. Another girl was saved 2 days ago. I don't even know who she is. I'm holding my breath because she knows me. Jack Chick got a call today. So the girl walked into a Christian bookstore and says, I hear John Todd's still alive. The guy said, yes. He's been alive for 5.5 years? And he said, yes. Well, if he can be alive for 5.5 years, I can be alive for 5.5 years. I want to become a Christian and get out. Now that is sweeping. That type of news is sweeping. You may not understand what that means. But if you were in East Berlin trying to get to West Berlin and there was a wall of death between you, you'd know what it means. If they tore that Berlin Wall down, you can imagine the East Berliners, how many would be flooding to West Berlin. Well, that wall of fear and death that the Illuminati has so strongly built up has just been shattered. We have done in the last month things on purpose that they have promised the occult world would never happen. Isaac Bonowitz, the Rothschild's own enforcer and one of those 13 top witches, lives in Frisco. He promised that the #1 witchcraft city in the United States I would never preach in, San Francisco. We preached there 2 Sundays ago. He's got a lot of explaining to do. And the word is getting around. We need your prayers. There's a revival breaking open in the occult world now. They have gotten the word. There's a way out. I'm just going to have to start praying for 3 or 4 more buildings. Because if this carload gets here, we're not going to have much more room. We got a 4-bedroom house. It can fill up pretty quick with a bunch of witches in it. So, by the way, we need your prayers just for that. You've never been in a situation where you have about 15 witches all around you at one time, all with different problems. My poor wife, she couldn't come with me tonight because she's setting up trying to get this one girl through it right now. So we do need your prayers. I want to thank the people who did take envelopes and send them. I think something like 500 envelopes were taken that night and we received them. But those 10 helped get that house open. And I want to thank the people who sent them. But I'm asking your prayers. We need your prayers. Now, as the pastor comes up, I want to say a couple words. You may not be in witchcraft. You may not think that this message has anything to do with you, but you're missing the whole point. I was in a world where it was impossible to become a Christian, and Jesus made me one. I was by one of the girls that I used to live with when I was in the occult world. Recently, she was at a very important witchcraft meeting that we happened to find out about, and I pulled into the parking lot for a few minutes to see who was there. And she walked by the car and had a couple Christian brothers with me. She looked in the car and just smiled and kept on walking. Never recognized me. That's the difference between the way I am now and the way I was then. When the Lord changes you, He totally changes you. Now, we give our testimony for several reasons to show that no matter what, whether you were raised a Christian and you know all your life, or you were raised in the worst frame of life, it's still the same miracle. God still saves you just the same. Sometimes I think it's harder to get the PKs and the Christian kids saved than it is the witches. But at the same time, we try to flag you down from going the same direction we went with drugs. You'll never know the feeling to lose so many friends that should be with you today and so many loved ones because of drugs that we kept convincing ourselves was all right. This isn't some preacher getting up here and telling you that's never been in it. I wished I had a half hour to talk about the worst thing that the occult world ever planned out and carried out. That's called rock music. But I'm going to say 2 quick things. Parents, the rock music does not belong to you, your kids. If your kids are in your home, it belongs to you and you're answerable for it. And if you want to believe they're garbage, that it's all right, and you want to forget things like Kiss saying that their real name is Kings and Satanic Service, and that rock music is actually satanic spells being cast and being planned by the Satanist church, and that's a direct quote, then you go right on ahead. Right now, one of the Manson family girls is in trial, and she said the #1 thing that the occult world used to brainwash them was Beatle music and rock music. If you want to leave it in your home, I won't go into details why you can't, but if you want to leave it in your home and all the demons that it attracts, fine. If you want your kids to buffalo you, that it's all right. But I recommend you go home today, get a cardboard box, and break the records and burn those covers and get it out of your home. And you'd be surprised at how fast your kids come around after they finish throwing their 2-year-old tantrum. But I wish that I had the time more on rock music, but believe me, it is the work carefully planned out in the occult world. We spent $8 million to produce Jesus rock music and pay the man who started it, named Chuck Smith, just because Christians were destroying rock music and we were afraid that it would be banned from the Christian church. So we carefully put it in the form of Christian rock music. So if they would spend $8 million to keep rock music in your hands, then the hardcore rock must be even worse. And it is. I'm going to... Okay, Pastor. I don't mind. I drove all day so I could say these things. I was the manager of Zodiac Productions, which Zodiac Productions, name's been changed since then. I'm not even sure what they call it now, but it's the largest music conglomerate in the world. It owns RCA Records, Columbia Records, Motown Records, owns almost all the concert booking agencies in the United States. And that's not even the name of the company that owns it. The name of the company that owns it is Brenner Enterprises, and Brenner Enterprises is owned by Chase Manhattan. Chase Manhattan's owned by Standard Oil, and Standard Oil is owned by the Lords of London. You can track it on back. You kind of get the idea after a while. But I was the managing president of Zodiac Productions. It's one of my jobs as being one of these 13 people. Thus, I got to know many of the people who produce music and sing the music and play the music that you play. Recently, one of the top people in rock music from the group, can't think of the name of the group now, it's one of the top rock groups still in existence that's been around a long time, was just saved. And he told how when they'd play in their concerts, they would control, through witchcraft spells in their mind, the people to do different things in the audience. And that they'd work the audience up not with their music, but with their mind and their music combination. Now, one of the closest friends that I got during that time that I obtained was a man named David Crosby. Crosby, Still, Nash and Young. And I saw David the day before Christmas last year, talked with him. I got him away from this witch that he had with him. He told her to go shopping. We were in West Hollywood, and I was witnessing around to people I knew. We went off in this store, and we started talking. I said, David, I'd like to ask you a couple questions. I said, I already know the answers, but I've been gone for 5 years. I'd like to know if certain things are still the way they were when I left. I said, now I'll have to explain some of this when I'm done, because you're not going to understand it all unless you know something about music. I said, do they still take the master to the temple room? Dave said, yeah. I said, do they still have the coven conjure demons into the master? He said, of course. I said, now, I got to know something. What's the main reason for rock music? He said, come on, Lance, you know what the reason is. I said, please, David, I don't want to guess. Tell me what the main reason is. He says, the same as when you were in, so that we can play spells on people that we couldn't cast spells upon. I'll explain what that means in a minute. I said, okay, one last thing. I've been hearing that you must be an initiated witch now to get a record contract. He said, that's right. He says, many of us that weren't total witches have to be witches now in order to produce music. I said, thank you. The master is a tape about as big as the top of this podium that looks like an overgrown 8-track that the album is cut on, and it's placed in a machine that produces and presses the records and the 8-tracks and cassettes that you buy. After it's been recorded, it's taken in. This is why a master's cut months in advance before it's released. On the full moon, it's taken in to a temple room about the size of this auditorium that is in every one of the major music companies, behind locked doors up in the executive offices. And it's placed on an altar sitting in the north of the room, and a pentagram engraved in the floor. And 13 hand-chosen witches and wizards and a coven come in and conjure a principality or a power up, usually Regia or something like that, and order him to tell the demons under him to follow every record and every tape coming off of that master. As I tell many Christian parents, you can go home and count your kids' records, probably yours too, and count how many demons at least are there. If that's too hard for you to believe, I'm sorry. That's why they do it. Now listen to me. This is why rock music's addicting. Have you ever seen kids that got rid of their music? They go around like this. They can't wait to find a rock station somewhere, and they sneak off just like getting a cigarette or a fix, because it's addicting. That's why they can't give it up. The rest of the conversation was this. You can't cast a spell on a Christian, but you can get a Christian to cast a spell on themselves. If you give the permission for the spell to work, being a Christian won't block it. And rock music is not just a song. It is supernatural music. that witches carefully designed by their spirit guides or familiar spirits in the form of spells. Now, although the devil's music's power is the music and God's music is the words, much of the songs are written in what we call witch language. To give you kind of an idea, many of you talk on a CB, unless you know what a smoky is, and a 10-4, and a front door and back door and rocking chair and these type of things, you don't know what you're talking about. Same with witches. When you're in the first and second level, you have to learn over 2,000 words that said by anybody else means something totally different than when you say them. Elton John has said he's never written a song or sung a song that wasn't in witch language. And I want to show you something. See how many kids in here, will be honest, and adults. How many remember and have heard at least several times a song called Hotel California? Somebody tell me what it meant. Quickly, somebody tell me what it meant. Huh? That's pretty close. But from the words, what did it mean? Well, that's more of a guess. See, most people can't tell you. That's why when people do drugs and they listen to songs in which language, they get some of the meaning. But most of the time, they can't tell you. Stop and think how many songs are out there that you really like, and you don't have any idea what the person was talking about. Beyond the Yellow Brick Road? How about The Destroyer by Kiss? Can anybody tell me what it's about? Kiss said in it, kids, kill your parents. They're talking about Helter Skelter. Beatles sung Helter Skelter in which language? Nobody knew what it meant. Manson did because he belonged to the process. Helter Skelter is a several thousand-year-old word. And they're believing that it's going to happen in a year from now, from this very date. Most of the music is either about Helter Skelter or a place called the Night Winds, which is what Hotel California is about, and different doctrines of witchcraft. You listen to them, your parents let you listen to them, and they have no idea. Kiss openly bragged how they were gaining control of people through their music because the people played their music. They told how they didn't form their own group. Their church, because they were ordained ministers of the Satanist church, placed them together. And that's how most of the music is done. David Crosby, when him and Crosby, Still, Nash & Young produced the record Two-Way Street, they ordered the principality of Medici to order demons of rebellion to go into the record, and everybody that heard it would be rebellious against law and order and government. And it was one of the reasons for the great upheaval in the 60s was that one album, and they take open credit for it. I can go on all night, but that's mainly it. Parents, get this stuff in and destroy it now. I guarantee you, your kids will straighten up. They may pout for a while, but they'll straighten up. Okay? Sorry it's so late.
All right. We've had live action here. We're a bunch of night owls now. This ain't nothing. How many of you believe he knows what he's talking about when he talks about rock music? Huh?
Not enough of the kids, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah. Well, I sincerely believe he knows exactly what he's talking about there. And I hope you'll listen to him. I hope you'll hear where he's coming from. And if you continue listening to that junk, where you're going. We just cannot tolerate it as Christian people in our homes. You can't stop it from being played and sold and all that, but we can't tolerate it. You mentioned a time or two the Illuminati. Could you, in just a few words, summarize what you understand the Illuminati is?
Okay. Many people call it the Great Conspiracy, which is kind of true, but actually the Illuminati is about 1,000 conspiracies all running at one time. Therefore, a lot of them backfired. But it was formed about 100 years before its original birth date. The birth date is May 1st, 1776, which has always started everything on May 1st. That's why even the communist birthday is on May 1st. That's their New Year's Day. But it means the holders of the light, or the light bearers. Now, witches have another name for it, too. Since it is a death penalty to use the name the Illuminati, you must say Mariah, which means the conquering, destroying wind. But its belief is that Lucifer is God, and that everything else is imposter, and that Lucifer can bring peace to the world by his lifters or upholders' conspiracy. And they're going to conspire and conspire and conspire till they have a world government. Sometimes I wonder why they could be so dumb that sitting there doing exactly what is going to lead to their destruction. But then that's usually how the devil is. He keeps everything in darkness. But that's the Illuminati. It's a world conspiracy, and I might add, an extremely powerful one. The occult is its religion. Now, many of you are doctors, lawyers, mechanics, construction workers, businessmen, whatever. Most of you are Christians and Baptists, okay? But he's your minister, or at least if you're from this church. And the Illuminati, they all have jobs. But the witches are their ministers, but they're all Luciferians. The witches are the ministers, and they're the church members, and the religion is Luciferianism. Now, the real Illuminati, the organization itself, is financially powerful and politically motivated. Through their finance, they have an old witch's room, which is kind of a saying, a poem. They say, let the kings be kings, let the bankers be bankers, and let the priests be priests. Translated, it simply means that it doesn't matter who rules, as long as the bankers have the money, they'll own the person who rules. And the priest will run the bankers. That's the Illuminati. Okay.
You mentioned, John, some publication, you said might be out in about 3 months. What is that again?
It's called Riot and Revolution. It's by Tom Berry, a classmate of my pastor, Roland Rasmussen, graduate from Bob Jones, a doctor in divinity. And it takes the plan of the Illuminati for helter-skelter and gaining control of the world. It takes some of my testimony to justify it, and then it gives an answer to Christians what to do during helter-skelter.
Where did the material come from, and how did he get it?
Some of it came from me, and some of it came from another minister named Joe Boyd. Some of it came from Jack Hounds. He's gathered. Also, he had about 20 pages of notes when I met him, which he said he gained by going through about 2,000 books, and they were on the Illuminati and the Bilderbergers. Okay?
Yeah.
Satan worshippers believe in Satan. Witches, the lower 3 levels, believe in gods or else God's self, in ESP and so on. They believe in plural gods like the mother goddess Isis and so on. Or the higher levels are Luciferians, which believe in one god and the minor gods being in the Rothschilds. Okay? That's the difference.
You mean the average witch is not taught that there is such a being as Lucifer or the devil?
Well, for one, when you believe in Lucifer, you don't believe he's the devil. Okay? No, they believe in the mother goddess, which is called by many names, as the poem about her goes. Diana, Isis, Asherah, which was the female side of Baal. And they believe, actually it's Baal worship, there was a male and female god. Asherah, and then the horned hunter of the night is the way he's portrayed in all countries, which is more or less kind of the underworld god, the devil, or whatever.
Okay. All right. Anybody with a question or two before we're going to take a love offering here?
There's no difference.
What was his question?
The difference between rock music and soul music. There's no difference. Okay?
All right, some other question.
In the back. They didn't come up with it. That was about a hurricane that somebody named Mariah. Okay? Yeah. Yes.
What are the things in the Synthetic Church, godly, lovely,
in the Satanist church, Christ and Jesus are the same person. Okay? No, that's the teaching. In the Satanist church, Christ, Jesus Christ, and Satan are the same person. That's the Satanist belief. And the Luciferian, they believe that Jesus Christ is the God of evil. Okay? Like we would feel about the devil, they feel about Jesus. And Lucifer, they feel towards him like we'd feel about Jesus. That's what they teach. Okay?
Dean?
I don't know what he said, but it must have been good. Well, a pastor didn't lead me. A Christian worker led me to the Lord. The person that helped rehabilitate me was Jack Taylor, but he wasn't around much because he was a pastor. He had to run around the country speaking. It was actually his music director and the youth director. Ann Rowitz was the youth director, and the music director was Malcolm Granger. And I stayed with Malcolm, and him and his wife worked with me, and the youth director worked with me quite a bit. But I don't envy him. I've sat back now, and I guess I kind of blocked my mind out how bad I was. But watching all these kids go through rehabilitation, man, that was no easy job. They had to be on their knees a lot, I'll tell you. Black Sabbath. Talking about the music group or a Black Sabbath? Well, the music group got its name from it. A Black Sabbath is a witch's Sabbath, okay? It comes 8 times a year. Beltane, if I can get the first part, Beltane is their New Year's Day. That was May 1st, okay? Halloween is Shaham. That was also one of theirs. There's 8 of them, okay? And they come around the year, and it's more or less their big party day. Their super day. Now, if they're in the human sacrifice, they also do human sacrifice at the time. But it's a big time to have an orgy and a big drug party and this type of thing because everybody wiped out. That's the witch's Sabbath.
Don?
Well, not the Satanist church, but the witchcraft church is. A very, very powerful witch has a song out about witchcraft now called The Force. His name is Tom T. Hall. I just heard a very sick song recently. Somebody let me hear. It was by Tammy Wynette, and it was talking about Jesus Christ appearing on midnight special or something like Saturday night something. Anyway, I'm afraid that if he appeared on that rock show, he'd probably bring the Cat of Nine Tails along with him. But some of the music, if it wasn't for witchcraft being behind rock music, I'd hate country the most. Because I don't see how Christians can listen to it when it's talking about adultery and fornication, getting drunk, cutting people up, running around with everybody else's wife, and things like this. And that's all I ever hear on it. Okay?
When?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what they were referring to. Yeah, they did. No, I'm not going to tell you. Okay?
I believe Vic and then Russ.
Mm-hmm. Human sacrifice? That's pretty...
Occasion.
Oh, well, the occasion was on a Sabbath, okay? That particular Sabbath happened to be February the 2nd, Candlemas, okay? What was the rest of it? Well, it's done, that particular one was done because of an initiation ceremony that was being done, mine. But most of the covens just practice 8 times a year if they're into blood sacrifice. See, the lower witches believe that the power for witchcraft comes from orgies and sex. The higher witches believe it's attained by human blood. Okay?
Russ, I believe you had your hand.
It's a revolution that they have planned within the United States. Most people feel that something like that will never happen in the United States. They're lying to themselves. It will happen, and it's not very far off. Well, by 1980, there'll be... Helter-skelter's only an excuse, okay? The excuse is to be able to declare martial law. That's the whole reason for it. They promised the one side that they will be able to gain control of the United States through revolution, when the whole time is they're just simply setting them up to be able to declare martial law and suspend the Constitution. And by 1980, they plan on being under martial law. Now, I'm not saying, don't all of you start lynching me at one time. I didn't say it was going to happen. I said, this is their plan, okay? I'll leave it up to your own prayer life and watching the newspapers whether it's going to happen or not.
Maxine.
Just like most other cults. See, Jesus Christ requires just one way. Only one way. The devil will use any way to keep your eyes off that one way. Okay? It uses the same tactics wherever it branches to. I have no idea if he came out after I got out. I have no idea. They were backing groups like him before, the Krishners and so on. I can't see much difference between them and those two groups. So they probably back him too.
Okay, Mike and then Bob.
Yeah, the Council of Foreign Relations. Yeah, and it's inner brainchild that runs it. It's called the Trilateral Commission. Okay?
Let's see, I'll leave Bob and then Barbara.
Yeah, there's 7 principalities, about 200 powers. Then it starts getting down into lower people we never pay attention to, the lower spirits.
Barbara?
Yeah, I want to go to all just recently, about 3 weeks ago in April. The day before Jack House came to our church to speak, and the day after he left, I came, both times I came walking out of the church at Faith Baptist. One time I got in my car, started to drive off in the parking lot, about 30 people were standing around, and a passing car opened up on us with a gun. And then, that was Sunday night. Then Wednesday night of that week, I was walking out into the parking lot prior to the church letting out with a couple of brothers. And when we dug the bullets out of where they hit, they had fired twice at us, and the bullets were .44 caliber, .44 Magnum. So they don't play around. And the range was so close, it was from the back of that wall to here. You know that the Lord is in it. It really makes you appreciate His divine protection, let me tell you.
Ruth?
That world takeover plan ended with World War III. But one of the teachings is that when Lucifer sets up his kingdom, okay, that through World War III, most of the civilized world as it exists now will be in rubble. The one protected capital that they have purposely kept all missiles away from both sides, is Jerusalem. And they plan on using Jerusalem to set up from there, okay? Do they believe that Adam's original home, or the Garden of Eden, rests where Jerusalem is? So they're going to rule from there.
Mike and then Robin, we better let that maybe very quick.
The church that I attend, and a member of it, Faith Baptist in Canoga Park, Dr. Rasmussen. The work where it's at, the house, has got to remain a sound. Okay? Very well. All of our church walk around, people trying to find out where it's at, and everybody, shh. It's like the unspeakable secret. Okay? Everybody knows, but nobody says. He was a member of the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which in California is called the Universal Church Triumphant Summit International. They always like these names. Okay?
Okay, let's see. Randy?
Not anymore.
I try to keep out of communication as much as possible with them. My foster mother has a huge contract on my life, and my brother's trying to collect it, so I try to stay away from them.
By the way, Randy, you cannot communicate with them. You communicate with demons. They imitate them. They cannot speak to you. Let's see. Yes, brother.
Oh, you mean in counting all 8 Sabbaths, say last year, from May 1st to May 1st, probably 500, and that's only a guess. I'm probably way under.
Dwayne has one of his books, Chick Publication, I believe it is, and it's made up like a comic book. It tells you, here it is.
Broken Crop. That's the one I wrote.
This is the one that tells you one of their main methods of how they get victims to offer up in blood sacrifice. All right, Robin, I think we better let this be it.
Okay, give me about a minute on this here.
Repeat her.
Okay, you heard at a Christian school. What one? Oh, in high school, okay. You heard that C.S. Lewis was a Christian, right? Okay. First of all, Christian Accelerated Schools has, what I'm about to tell you, have investigated what I said. Christian Accelerated Education, and because of it, are now ordering all their schools to ban Lewis's work. They checked into it very carefully. So did my pastor, because he was getting hit very hard with it. He found everything I said to be true. When a witch is ready to be initiated, she must not just read, but she must study the complete works of Lewis, fictional works. Lewis has said that the way to God is like a hallway with many doors. They all lead to him. Okay? Now, the fictional works of Lewis are very real to witches. They're not fictional, they're history to witches. They really believe them. Okay? They believe their guidelines. Now, Lewis was a member of the Golden Dawn. Now, that's been proven. Along with a fellow brother of the same coven named Tolkien, who wrote The Hobbit. They were in the same time. Now, the Golden Dawn is the private church that the Rothschilds must pick every member of that church personally. It's in London. The oldest coven in the world. Okay? That's Lewis. Whether he says he's a Christian or not, that doesn't mean anything. That's where Christians are making their terrible mistake.
Could it be that he was like that, and like you said, he got converted, now he is no longer that?
He would have had to tell it. When Lewis' name was on the Golden Dawn records right up to the time that I got out. I mean, there's no betrayal there. He never did leave them. Okay? I want to say something real quick that will answer this. Many people supposedly are getting saved from the Manson family and from other things. Let me tell you something real quick so there will be no misunderstanding. If you come out of the occult, you come out of the Masons, you come out anything of the Illuminati, there's one distinct thing. Anywhere there's a vow of secrecy, that vow of secrecy must be broken. Not in part, complete. When somebody breaks their complete vow of secrecy, they're out. But until they do, they're not out. Okay?
Charlene, this is it.
That's right.
Written in double what?
Witch's language. That's exactly right. Okay.
Did you hear his question? How do Masons relate to all of this?
Okay.
Listen closely, you Masons.
Council 13 is the highest council in the Illuminati. The council right below it is the Council of 33. That's called the Grand Masters. There are the 33 highest Masons in the world. To be a member of the Council of 33, you must take a human life in a ceremony to prove your worthiness. We have in our hands copies, and Chick Publications is releasing this in their new book, Angel of Light. Copies of a 32nd, 33rd level book which proclaims Jesus Christ, the God of brutality and sin and evil, and Lucifer, the God of love, beauty, and peace, and the true God. Yeah, a little shocking, huh? Different from the way it's portrayed. But don't be mad at the lower Masons. It also says in the same book that the lower Masons are sheep to be sheared. Now, many Masons are getting saved through our message, lower and higher, because they recognize when I didn't tonight, gave my initiation to become a witch, and my vow of secrecy is the same as theirs, all the way through, the same, no different. Now, Masons were started by the Illuminati. It's all through our history that they're tied with the Illuminati. Their rites are witchcraft rites, when witchcraft had to go underground. We've had people come in and tear up their membership cards and get right with the Lord, mainly because, if you didn't know this, Charles Finney was a Mason, and when he got saved, he said, I can't be a Mason and be a Christian. It is impossible, because the vows I must take are non-Christian vows. Okay? People are getting saved right and left, and they all have one thing to say. When they leave the Masons, the reason they didn't leave before is they were afraid of what the Masons would do to them. Now, if it is a good group, why are people afraid to leave it?